Yeah. All I need is one mic. Yeah. All I need is one mic.
Hey everybody, welcome back to a new episode of One Mic, where I watch shit so you don't have to. And today I'm here to talk about season 4, episode 8 of The Handmaid's Tale, entitled Testimony. The testimony title is pretty obvious here. We see June testify in what is not, and they made this very clear in the episode, which is not the trial of Serena and Fred, but more of a hearing to solidify charges. At the end of June's monologue, she requests full charges be levied against Serena and Fred. So that's the testimony that we're referring to here is June's testimony in the episode, and that it's very clear it's not a trial. I had kind of a lot of issues with this episode. Some of them are more more personal, as in like these are things that frustrate or irritate me specifically because of my own personal experiences in life, and I just have like a soft spot for certain types of behavior. And then a couple of some of it's a little bit more a knock against the show. But I want to talk about June because I feel like I've talked about this throughout the course of the season. Very, very early on, within the first 3 episodes, I said that I felt like they were trying to essentially do a heel turn for June and kind of make her to start have her start doing things that we as the viewers will begin to find unacceptable. That June's making a lot of decisions that we won't agree with. And I kind of receive, I don't want to say I received pushback, but like, I feel like people weren't necessarily on board with the idea of June kind of, I don't want to say becoming a bad guy, but starting to do things that we just can't readily accept. Like we won't be able to be 100% fully on June's side, despite what she's been through. And I think at this point, it's pretty safe to say that June has kind of made that turn. I found a lot of what June did in this episode, and I found a lot of what June has done in this season, period, to be incredibly obnoxious. Like, I do not find at this present moment June to be a likable character. And this is not a flaw of the show. Like, this is something where, you know, she has the experiences that would create this kind of person. And I think the show wants us to draw these parallels between June's behavior and Aunt Lydia's behavior, and how Aunt Lydia, throughout the course of the show, has felt in her heart that she is doing the right thing. And I think in this episode, it's no more clearer, because in the conversation she has with Commander Lawrence, you can tell that she's really broken up at the idea of being terminated. And you can always tell throughout the course of this show that even when she's doing really shitty things, that Aunt Lydia is not doing them because she wants to be mean. She believes that in her heart that she is doing the right thing, and that in the long run, her behavior will have a positive impact on these girls. And right now, I believe that June believes the same thing. June believes that everything she's doing is what's best for these handmaids who have escaped Gilead. And what irritates me about that is I don't like people who feel that their way is the right way. We're talking about grief here. We're talking about trauma. We're talking about recovery. We're talking about mental health. The gall of someone to think that they have the magic prescription to remedy these ills. Like, and throughout this episode, consistently, June decides that she knows what's best for everyone, and that's what everyone needs to be doing. And I find people like that to be hideous. I hate people like that. So for me, watching June feel like this entitled, like I know what's best and you should listen to me and do what I say and I'm gonna be in charge. Watching her do that throughout this episode made me really dislike June this week, and it's been building. And I over the course of this season, where she's been more and more entitled, she's been more and more bossy, she's been more and more rude and disrespectful to people. And what we get in the comments sometimes on these videos, or not even on my video specifically, but just on Al Gore's internet, people will say things like, you know, well, June's been through a lot, trauma this, trauma that, which is all very true, and that provides context to why she is doing the things that she's doing. What I don't agree with is using that as like a form of mental gymnastics to not admit that she's doing something wrong. June's behavior is justified from the perspective of these are the actions of someone who has been through what they've been through. But I don't want to sit here and pretend like these actions are not bad because of what she's been through. She's doing some shitty stuff. And this is it's at a point right now where I feel like the viewership should almost be acknowledging at this point, like, okay, June's doing some fucked up stuff. If we are all on the same page that she has a good reason for what she's doing, that's cool. But I don't think that should be something to where you can use that as a reason to still side with her and to say that this is okay. It's not okay. And I think and we don't have to live in a world of one or the other. It cannot be okay, and it can also be justified. And I think that's where we need to live at as it pertains to June, is that a lot of what she's doing is not okay, but it's justified because of it makes sense for her character and where she's come from and what she's been through. So a lot of what I didn't like about this episode revolves around that. I think the biggest example, I think, for me is actually the second to last scene in the episode. It's I think the third or fourth time that we end up in this library with this I guess survivors meeting that they have weekly. And the scene opens with them discussing the death of the suicide of this Aunt Irene, who June forced everyone to accept into this group, which is an earlier scene that probably the second most irritating scene for me behind this one. But the scene opens and you have a couple of the handmaids there, and they say something like, oh, it's sad what happened to her. She should have had a trial, yada, yada, yada. And June's just sitting there looking, kind of like irritated, kind of impatient, I think maybe might be the best way to put it. And she says, let's let Emily say how she feels about it. And Emily essentially says, yeah, I'm happy she's dead, and I hope I had something to do with it. And immediately to me, I'm like, this doesn't sound like Emily. This sounds like June. And then literally the exact same two people who said that her death was sad and that she should have had a trial then go, if my commander was here, I'd cut his dick off. And if his wife was here, I'd have a broomstick. And like this whole thing, right? They immediately changed their tune. And June says something like, there you go. And this evil influence that she's having over everyone, she's taking people who are trying to heal, good people, and she's essentially trying to corrupt them, to pull them over to her side. And that's where I have a problem with it, because like this is not I know this is just not cool. Like, she's making people be someone who they are not. And that's fine for you. Like, why isn't it enough for you to be on the crusade that you're on to save your daughter and to rain vengeance down upon all these people? Why is that not enough? Why do you have to exact your own revenge and then exact revenge for others? Or even worse, convince people that they should be exacting revenge when they don't even have any intention or desire to do that until you put it in their head. So like, that really irritated me. And she's sitting there looking so smug and proud of herself that now she somehow convinced these people to want to do horrible things that they otherwise had no intention of doing 10 seconds ago in the scene. And again, I acknowledge that we are meant to, I believe anyway, we are meant to draw these parallels between her and Aunt Lydia, that the feeling of what's right and what's best for these people, and then now corrupting them and making them into something different. And that's what these people, all of these women who made it out of Gilead, they're different. And they're different because of what happened to them in Gilead. And now June is essentially doing the same thing to them again, without the torture and the rape and all that kind of stuff. But like, she's influencing them to become people they're not, do things they're not, that sort of thing. Doesn't sit well with me. And like I said, just my own personal thing is just, I don't like people who feel like they know what's best for everyone. Like, the arrogance of that. I don't like arrogance, period. The arrogance of that is mind-boggling to me. So rewinding a little bit, at the beginning of the episode, when she first comes to the meeting, she asks Moira, why isn't everyone angrier? That's something that I ask openly, often. Why isn't everyone angrier? Because that's me. I'm a temper kind of guy. I'm always pissed off about one thing or the other. And I always feel like the things that I'm pissed off about are things that everyone should be pissed off about. What I don't do is is go on, like, it is manipulate people into being someone they're not, so that they can, because I feel like they should be as angry as I am, so I'm going to make sure that they are as angry as I am. And I just I grow tired of this idea that June thinks that what she feels is right is best, and she forces Emily to confront this Aunt Irene against the will of the group. And again, the entitlement. These people have been doing this already. She's new. She's the latest arrival. And she comes in and again, she knows what's best for everyone. She brings in Irene. She's like, okay, who all wants Irene here? And then people reluctantly are raising their hands, not because they want Irene there, but because June is such a bully that they feel like they have to have Irene there, because they didn't want her there at first. And then, she makes Emily confront this person. And then Emily says something like, she says, I can't remember what she said, but Emily responds with, everyone's not like you. And I feel like that should have hit home a little bit harder than I think it did. But yeah, that was a sign of things to come. Another thing I want to talk about is the little bit of time we spent in Gilead. We see Aunt Lydia with the new handmaids. She's clearly on edge. She comes down on one of them pretty hard. She, with like the cattle prod, she hits the other aunt. I forget her name. I think Ruth, maybe. I can't remember. I think it's the same really tall aunt that walked up on her when she was on the treadmill. I think in like episode 4 or something like that. But she's clearly broken up about everything going on with June. But again, it kind of makes sense because she's gonna feel like she failed, because she really does feel like everything she's doing is for their own good. So we later see her with Janine. Commander Lawrence reveals that Janine has been captured, and Janine essentially asked to not be a handmaid anymore. And they share like a something of a hug that I can't tell if Janine is kind of starting to come around to the idea that June abandoned her and she should feel some sort of resentment toward June, or if it's just kind of like I don't want to say an act, because I don't think it's an act, but if there's still a little bit of hesitance there. Reticence is what I was going to say. Another thing that I liked is I liked the performance of the actor who plays Luke. I know his name, but I don't know how to pronounce it. I don't want to mess it up. But I thought he did a really good job again this week. Very good subtle stuff with his face that he does, that I think he does a great job of expressing emotion on his face in a natural way that feels like that's how somebody would really respond to something. I think the big scene in this episode is June's testimony. Obviously, that's why it's called Testimony. And it's a long, I want to say, I don't know, I'll just say 5 minutes or so. 5 minutes or so of June essentially just monologuing into the camera. And that's got to be tough as an actor, to just kind of talk into the camera with the amount of like sheer emotion that should be present in someone who is essentially, what she's doing is retelling the entire series up to this point, like the major bullet points of the series that have happened up to this point. And, relaying something like that, the amount of emotion that one would have having that conversation, I think she does a good job of trying to portray that without having someone to work off of. That's got to be very difficult. During her speech, it never cuts. It's one long shot, like I said, maybe about 5 minutes, something like that. It doesn't, I kind of expected or was wondering if it was going to cut to show Luke's reactions, because he showed up even though she didn't want him to, if it was going to show Fred's reactions, but it never did. And it stayed on her the entire time. And it slowly zoomed in on her face. And the reason I want to talk about that scene is not because of her speech, which was excellent, but it's because I'm noticing now, and I maybe you guys can help me get a clearer understanding of it, but I'm noticing now that this show seems to really be overdoing the tight and long shots on Elisabeth Olsen's face. And it's one of those things where it's like, okay, say you notice a technique, right, that a filmmaker might use in their films, and you notice this technique, and you're like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool, that's a nice shot, or that was a nice transition or whatever it is you might notice, right? And you notice it and you say, okay, that had an adequate impact. I noticed that. Cool. And they continue to do that. And you go, okay, I see that you're doing that now. Okay, you're kind of overdoing it. And then after that, I think it gets to the point where it's almost laughable and predictable. And like, okay, you're just really just going to do this over and over. Like it's going to have the exact same impact that it did after the first 500 times you did it. It's still going to have the same impact on time 501. And I feel like that's where we are with these tight shots of June's face, because I am so fucking sick of this technique. It is so like it feels like the show thinks it's doing something incredibly special by leaving the camera on her face for long periods of time and having her just stare into the camera like a badass. It's like that's the kind of thing that has a impact. Like you really can only do that once. You do that again, it's kind of corny at that point. This show has done it about 8,000 times. It did it twice in this episode alone, and it's closed out multiple episodes that way as well. It went like the episode where she got off the boat first arriving in Canada. It closed with her just standing there. Okay, yeah, we get it. Cool. like what is that even like? Okay, we get it. She's like step foot on Canadian soil for the first time, but it's like you feel like having this tight shot of her face is really gonna make me like have some huge emotional moment that's not already present with her just standing there with what I'm getting from the show up to that point. And like the tight close-ups on Elisabeth Olsen's face when she's having these moments, it's gotten to the point where it's like now I'm just laughing at it. I'm like, okay, you're really gonna do this over and over and over and over. Kind of like how, actually, I think it was the first time they didn't show the train thing in the I was gonna say kind of like how they keep showing the train thing over and over. I think it's the first time they didn't show the train thing, but they do it again at the end of the episode. Which scene was this? Oh, it was when the scene that I talked about earlier in the library, after everyone's said, they broomsticks and cutting dicks off and all this kind of stuff, and they zoom in tight on Elisabeth Olsen's face again, and she's looking very smug and proud of herself. And I'm like, wow, 2 times in one episode. That's a first. So that's one of my cons for this episode that I feel like is something that's more of a reflection of the show and not my own personal disdain for the I know it's best attitude that June has as of late. That technique of just like hanging on her face for long periods of time or zooming in or nearly filling up the frame with her face and just leaving it there for a long time, like a dramatic pause that has not a single ounce of drama to it at all. That it's now officially worn out for me. But when they did it the second time of the episode, that's when it reached the point of laughter, where I'm like, okay, you think this is real fucking clever? This long shot on her face is like just the fucking. Just an amazing piece of cinema is what you think you're doing. And now I'm laughing at it because you think it's so good that you're going to do it once or twice an episode. But yeah, that was kind of crazy. And I think I only had one other thing I want to talk about. I talked about Luke having a good performance this episode. I talked about Lydia. Let's see. Oh, Fred and Serena. After the monologue from June in the hearing, Fred has a moment where he kind of stands up and he's like, this is God's will, God's path. We were rewarded by God for this, putting his hand on Serena's belly. Gilead is the only place with increasing birth rate. Basically trying to say that the ends justify the means is kind of the point that he was making, which is typical Gilead bullshit, right? Whatever. Exactly what I would expect of Fred. Who is another person who I think actually believes everything that he says. But they cut later to a scene where him and Serena are leaving, and there are people out there cheering for them. And that's the only thing, and I'm curious what you guys think about this. I don't find that plausible. I don't know if these are people who are always outside cheering for the Waterfords. I don't even understand why there would be people in Canada who would look at Gilead and go, yeah, that seems like a good idea. But again, they might not know the nature of what happens in Gilead. They might only know the results. But the way that played, it almost felt as if the crowd of supporters outside had heard what Fred had said in the previous scene. And I don't know if that's how we're meant to take it, but that's how it played to me. And I don't see someone hearing what June said, hearing what Fred said, and then going, yay, Waterfords. Like, I don't, that's not plausible to me. So I'm wondering if these are just not protesters, they're supporters. Like these supporters who are just always there outside, ready to cheer for them and hoping that they're freed. Because I hope that's what it is, and that they just, maybe I missed it or they didn't convey it well, because I find it completely implausible that they could have somehow found out what he said. Because I don't know if this was a televised hearing. I don't know, but I find it implausible that they could have heard what he said and been like, oh yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Go Fred. Like, then they only turned on the TV after June was done. But the scene didn't play to me like it was something that was televised. I feel like that's something that would have shown on the screen if it was televised. And like I said, that's not a very plausible reaction to me if it were televised. So I feel like these are just supporters that they have. But I just feel like the way these scenes were displayed was a little confusing. Like I said, it kind of felt to me, because I think he called them protesters at first. It kind of felt to me like this was a response to the hearing, which doesn't make a lot of sense to me. So just a little minor quibble. But my biggest thing is the camera shot that they keep doing. And at this point, I am firmly on the side of June not being a likable character. June is pretty much on Aunt Lydia levels without beating people. And I truth be told, I had not ruled out the fact that they were going to beat the shit out of Aunt Irene when June sat her in the middle of that circle. I'm like, are they going to fucking stone her or something like that? And yeah, so I feel like June is in that realm, and I don't think that we are meant to still be feeling like Team June here. Like I think we're meant to be accepting of the fact that she is not doing the right thing. Speaking of which, and then this is the last thing I want to talk about before I wrap up. Luke tries to connect with her on multiple occasions, and she seems to be almost repulsed by Luke. Interesting scene after, I believe it's after the testimony. She comes back to the house and he's trying to talk to her, and he's like, I'm sorry I came to it, but now I know what's going on and maybe we can get past it. Now, in that moment I thought, okay, too far. You can't say like, oh, I was there and I heard what you said, so now let's move on and pretend like, so like you can't just snap your fingers and now everything's okay. You can't do that. So I wasn't with Luke in that moment. But then she walks over to him and she's standing there, she starts to kiss him, and before she starts to kiss him, she makes a face almost kind of like, because I think they're hugging. He can't see her face, but we can. And it looked like she made a face almost kind of like, fine, I don't want to talk about this, so I'm just going to rape this guy real quick so that we don't have to deal with this. And then she starts to do it again. And again, another moment of, I really don't like what June is doing. The look on her face before she started doing that, as if like sexual assault is her out. Like, oh, I don't want to have an uncomfortable conversation, so let me rape my husband so I can go not talk about this. And he stops her. He says, he stops her forcefully and says, we need to talk. And she walks out and has a look of disgust on her face, like she's repulsed by him. And I find that to be, again, just incredibly off-putting for her character. Like I find it difficult to accept anyone trying to defend her actions at this point from a perspective of, you can defend them from the perspective of, this is what she's doing because of what she's been through. But I need people to start acknowledging she's doing fucked up stuff, and that we should not be sitting here like this is okay. Like, and I shouldn't have to draw that line post-rape, but I feel like I still have to do it, because I feel like there's still people who are out here who are like, yeah, Team June, she's been through a lot. Yeah, she's been through a lot, but that doesn't make what she's doing okay. And I feel like, she kind of crossed the line last week with the rape. I feel like we should all be in agreement and on board with the fact that she's doing some pretty shitty stuff. And even in the last scene, she says, I'm ready I want to talk to you about the last time I saw Hannah. But then it looked like I don't know, it looked to me like she almost made a face after that, kind of like I'm doing this just to placate him, as opposed to like she actually wants to have a conversation with her husband. So 2 episodes left. I think next week it's probably going to be a pretty bad week for Janine, I'm guessing. And I still feel like there is a level of escalation that they are going to bring June to, where I think it's going to be pretty customarily agreed upon that she's being a real asshole. Moira already seems to be on board with that. Moira said she thought it was shitty about forcing Emily to confront Aunt Irene. Moira looked disgusted by her satisfaction with what the people were saying in the meeting. And then Moira tries to wrap up the meeting, and hey, but wait, no. June knows what's best. Fucking obnoxious. And she's like, oh, I'll stay longer, almost to undermine Moira. Like, Moira's like, okay, I see people are getting fired up, so I'm going to stop the meeting. And June's like, no, they're doing what I want them to do, so I'm going to stay here and help them continue to get riled up and angry like I am, because I know what's best for them and how to heal for them and what they need to be doing. Episode had a lot of things I didn't like about it. It wasn't a bad episode, because a lot of the things that I didn't like are things that I personally are hot button issues for me. So her behavior really pissed me off in this episode. Really, the only thing I think the episode did wrong is that camera shot that I'm sick of. And that's really only it. But a lot I didn't like in this one, but I'm ready to hear what you guys think. I'm prepared to possibly have people come in the comments and I don't know, shit on me. I don't know. I'm careful with what I say, and I think I have been to this point, because I'm very wary of the fact that I'm one of the few male perspectives on this show, and I don't want to fuck that up. I want to give you guys my thoughts on the episode, and I don't want to come off as someone who is unknowledgeable or insensitive to the dynamics of this show and what has happened at this point. But what I can do is I can sit here and say June is treating people poorly, and I don't think that's up for debate. I feel like that's what the show wants us to take from it, is that June is becoming like Aunt Lydia, and that Gilead corrupts people, which they covered time and time again on this show, on what Gilead takes from you and how it corrupts you. And I think that we are meant to take that away now, that Gilead has essentially turned June into an Aunt Lydia before our own eyes, and this is the evidence of it. And I think we need to have a discussion about the fact that a lot of what she's doing and the way she's treating people, including Janine, is not okay. And yeah, she's been through a lot, and that is why she is behaving in the manner that she's behaving, but that doesn't make it okay. So that's where I land. I hope you guys don't shit on me, but if you do, I really don't care. I'm here to tell you what I think about the episode. That's my thoughts, but I am anxious to hear yours, and I will continue to have conversations with you guys in the comments. And I'll see you guys for the penultimate episode next week. Peace.